The rifle barrel pressed cold against Cora Prescott's spine before she even heard the footsteps. She froze in the Iron Basin town square, one hand still gripping the leather mail satchel, the other halfway to her coat pocket. Behind her, a man's voice cut through the December wind. "You're under arrest. Hands where I can see them." She raised both palms slowly, her breath misting in the frigid air, her mind racing through every possible reason and landing on the worst one. They knew. Someone had finally connected her name to her brother's. The wanted posters had reached Iron Basin. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she turned her head just enough to see the deputy's hard face, his eyes flat and certain. She opened her mouth to speak, to deny, to buy time. But movement across the square stopped her cold. A tall figure in a heavy coat and work-stained shirt stepped out from the livery stable entrance, his gray-blue eyes locking onto the scene with instant sharp focus. Wyatt Keene. Ranch hand from Willow Ranch. She had delivered mail to his foreman twice in the past month and noticed him each time, quiet and watchful, always working, never speaking more than necessary. Now he crossed the frozen dirt street in long strides, his expression unreadable, his hands loose at his sides. The deputy barked a warning. "Step back, Keene. This doesn't concern you." Wyatt stopped 3 feet away, his gaze flicking from the rifle to Cora's face and back. "What's the charge?" The deputy's jaw tightened. "Harboring a known outlaw. Aiding and abetting. She's got family ties to the Prescott gang." Cora's stomach dropped. Wyatt's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw the calculation happening, the weighing of risk. Then he shifted his weight and stepped directly between her and the rifle. "I know her. She's the mail carrier. She's been running this route clean for 6 months. You got proof of anything beyond a shared name?" The deputy's face flushed. "That's not your call." Wyatt held his ground, his voice calm and cold. "Then get the marshal. Arrest her proper with witnesses and paperwork. But you're not dragging her off on suspicion in the middle of the square." The wind gusted hard, lifting dust and grit. Cora's pulse hammered in her ears. She didn't know why this man was risking trouble for her, didn't know what he wanted or what he thought he knew, but she felt the danger of the moment shift and tilt. The deputy hesitated, his grip on the rifle wavering. Wyatt didn't move. Finally, the deputy spat into the dirt and stepped back. "She stays in town. She runs. It's on you." He turned and stalked toward the marshal's office, his boots heavy on the frozen ground. Wyatt turned to face Cora, his eyes steady and unreadable. "You need to talk. Now." She followed him to the back room of the dry goods store, her legs unsteady, her mind spinning. The storekeeper's wife nodded them through without a word, her face sympathetic. Wyatt closed the door and leaned against it, his arms crossed. "So, Prescott gang. That your brother?" Cora set the mail satchel down carefully, buying herself a second. "Yes." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "But I'm not part of it. I haven't seen him in 4 years. I left. I got clean work. I stayed clean." Wyatt studied her, his expression giving nothing away. "Why'd you come here?" She met his eyes. "Because Iron Basin's small enough that no one asks questions. and far enough from the territorial line that bounty hunters don't bother. I thought I had time. He was quiet for a moment. Then he pushed off the door and moved to the small window, looking out at the darkening sky. Storm's coming in hard. Dust storm. Maybe worse. You got somewhere to go tonight? She shook her head. I rent a room at the boarding house. But if the Marshal decides to lock me up. Wyatt turned back. You're not going to jail. Not tonight. He pulled a worn pair of gloves from his coat pocket and tugged them on. Willow Ranch is 2 miles out. You'll ride there with me. Stay in the guest cabin until this blows over. She stared at him. Why would you do that? He met her eyes, and for the first time she saw something raw beneath the calm. Because I know what it's like to be judged for family you didn't choose, and because you've been doing honest work. That counts. She wanted to argue, wanted to refuse, wanted to ask what he was hiding behind that steady voice. But the wind rattled the window frame, and she heard the first pelting of dust against the glass. He was right about the storm, and she had no better option. All right. Thank you. He nodded once. We leave now, before it gets worse. They rode out as the sky turned bruised purple, and the wind began to howl. Cora sat behind Wyatt on his sturdy bay gelding, one arm wrapped around his waist to keep her balance, the other clutching her satchel. The dust hit them before they cleared the edge of town, stinging and blinding, turning the world into a roaring brown chaos. Wyatt urged the horse faster, leaning low, and Cora pressed her face against his shoulder, tasting grit, feeling the animal's powerful stride beneath them. She couldn't see anything, couldn't hear anything but wind. She had no choice but to trust him. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Then the horse slowed, turned, and suddenly, they were inside, sheltered, the roar muffled by walls. Cora opened her eyes. They were in a barn, large and solid, the air thick with the warm smell of hay and horses. Wyatt dismounted and reached up to help her down. She slid off, stumbling slightly, her legs shaky. He caught her elbow and steadied her. You all right? She nodded, brushing dust from her face. Where are we? Willow Ranch. Main barn. The cabin's 50 feet that way, but we're not making it tonight. Storm's too thick. We'll stay here. He led the horse into a stall, stripped the saddle with practiced efficiency, and rubbed the animal down. Cora stood near the door, watching, feeling useless and out of place. When he finished, he turned to her. There's a tack room in back with a stove. It's not fancy, but it's warm. Come on. She followed him through the dim barn, past stalls where other horses shifted and snorted, to a small room lined with saddles and bridles. Wyatt lit a lantern and knelt by a small pot-bellied stove, feeding in kindling and striking a match. The fire caught quickly, and warmth began to seep into the cold space. He stood and pulled off his coat, shaking out the dust. Cora did the same, setting her satchel on a bench. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Wyatt looked at her directly. You said you left 4 years ago. What happened? She hesitated, then decided she owed him honesty. My brother killed a man in a robbery. I didn't know until after. I was 18. I thought we were just running cons, small stuff. When I found out what he'd done, I told him I was leaving. He laughed, said I'd come back when I got hungry. I never did. Wyatt's expression didn't change, but she saw his shoulders relax slightly. That why you took up mail carrying? She nodded. It's steady. It's honest. People trust you when you deliver their letters. I wanted to be someone people could trust. He was quiet, staring into the stove. Then he said, my father was a thief. Small time. Got himself shot when I was 16. I spent years trying to prove I wasn't him. Worked every bad job on every bad ranch, until someone finally gave me a real chance. That was Willow Ranch. 3 years ago. She looked at him, seeing him differently now. The careful stillness, the controlled voice, the way he had stepped between her and the deputy without hesitation. He understood. Maybe he was the only person in Iron Basin who could. Thank you for getting me out. He met her eyes. Don't thank me yet. If they decide to come after you tomorrow, I'll be in trouble too. She swallowed. I won't let that happen. I'll leave before dawn if I have to. He shook his head. You leave now? You look guilty. You stay. We figure it out together. We. The word hung between them, small and impossibly heavy. She didn't know what to say. The wind screamed outside, and the fire crackled in the stove, and for the first time in 4 years, Cora Prescott didn't feel entirely alone. They spent the night in the tack room. Wyatt found 2 wool blankets and insisted she take the bench while he sat on the floor with his back against the wall. Cora tried to argue, but he ignored her, his face set. She lay down eventually, exhaustion dragging at her, but sleep didn't come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the deputy's rifle, felt the cold dread of discovery. She had been so careful. 6 months of clean work, of keeping her head down, of building a quiet life where no one looked twice. And it had taken one wrong connection, one sharp-eyed lawman with a long memory, to unravel it all. She turned on the bench, pulling the blanket tighter. Across the small room, Wyatt sat with his eyes half closed, his breathing slow and even. She wondered what he was thinking, if he regretted helping her, if he was calculating how to distance himself before the trouble spread. But then he opened his eyes and looked at her, and the steady calm in his gaze was still there, unchanged. You should sleep. We'll deal with the Marshal in the morning. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe there was a way through this that didn't end with her running again, starting over in another nameless town, carrying another load of secrets. But belief was a luxury she'd lost a long time ago. What if he doesn't listen? What if he decides I'm guilty no matter what? Wyatt's jaw tightened. Then we'll make him listen. She studied his face, the hard line of his mouth, the set of his shoulders. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, because you stepped in when the livery owner's horse bolted last month. You could have let it run. But you grabbed the reins and calmed it down before it hurt someone. I saw that. That's who you are. She remembered the moment, barely. It had been instinct, nothing heroic. But he had noticed. He had seen her. The thoughts settled into her chest, warm and unfamiliar. Thank you. He nodded once and closed his eyes again. Get some sleep, Cora. She did, finally, lulled by the warmth of the stove and the strange, fragile comfort of not being alone. Dawn came cold and clear. The storm had passed, leaving the world blanketed in a fine layer of dust. Wyatt woke her gently, and they made their way out of the barn into the pale morning light. Willow Ranch spread before them, a sturdy main house, several outbuildings, corrals, and the long, low shape of the bunkhouse. Smoke rose from the main house chimney. Wyatt led her toward a small cabin set apart from the others, weathered wood, and a single window. This is the guest cabin. Foreman uses it sometimes when we're short-handed. You'll stay here today. I'll go into town, talk to the marshal, see what the situation is. She stopped. You're going back. Alone. He looked at her. If I don't, it looks worse. If I go and ask questions like a concerned citizen, maybe I can get ahead of this. She wanted to argue, but the logic was sound. All right. Be careful. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or something warmer. Then he nodded and turned toward the barn. She watched him go, feeling the weight of waiting settle over her like a stone. The hours crawled. Cora paced the small cabin, unable to settle, her mind spinning through worst-case scenarios. By midday, she forced herself to sit, to breathe, to think clearly. If the marshal arrested her, she would run. She had done it before. She could do it again. But the thought felt heavier now, more costly, because of Wyatt. Because he had risked something for her, and if she ran, it would blow back on him. She stared at the wall, hating the choice. Then she heard hoofbeats. She moved to the window, heart pounding. Wyatt rode into the yard, his face grim. She met him outside. He dismounted and faced her. The marshal's holding off for now. But there's a complication. Bounty hunters. 2 of them rode into town this morning asking about the Prescott gang. They've got a list of known associates. Your name's on it. Cora's blood turned cold. What did the marshal say? Wyatt's expression hardened. He told them he'd look into it. But he's not going to hold them off for long. If they find proof you're connected, they'll take you. And the reward's high enough that they won't care if you're guilty or not. She felt the walls closing in. I have to leave. Tonight. Wyatt shook his head. If you run now, they'll hunt you. You'll never stop running. She stared at him. What's the alternative? Stay here and wait for them to drag me off. He stepped closer, his eyes intense. There's another option. We go to the territorial judge. You testify about what your brother did. You put it on record that you left, that you've been living clean. If the judge believes you, he can clear your name. Bounty hunters can't touch you if there's no legal case. Cora's breath caught. That's a huge risk. If the judge doesn't believe me, then you're in custody, and it's over. But if you run, it's over anyway. Slowly. This way, you've got a chance. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe there was a path that didn't end with her looking over her shoulder for the rest of her life. But belief required trust, and trust was the thing she had learned to live without. Why do you care? She asked it bluntly, needing to know. Wyatt's jaw tightened. Because you deserve a chance. And because I'm tired of watching people get crushed for sins they didn't commit. Something in his voice told her this wasn't just about her. This was personal. She took a slow breath. All right, We'll go to the judge. When? Tomorrow. We'll ride out before dawn. The judge is in Silver Ridge, 2 days' travel. We'll need supplies. Cora nodded, her pulse still racing, but her mind beginning to clear. Thank you, Wyatt. He met her eyes, and for a moment the space between them felt charged, fragile, full of things neither of them could say yet. Then he turned back toward the barn. I'll get the horses ready. You pack light? We're moving fast. That night, Cora couldn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the narrow cot in the guest cabin, staring at the small pile of belongings she had packed. One change of clothes, her mail satchel, a small knife. It wasn't much. It was everything. Outside, the wind had picked up again. Not a storm this time, but a restless cold current that rattled the window frame. She thought about her brother, about the last time she had seen him. He had been laughing, reckless, convinced the world owed him something. She had loved him once, but love hadn't been enough to change him, and staying would have destroyed her. She had made the right choice. She knew that. But it didn't make the consequences easier. A quiet knock pulled her from her thoughts. She opened the door. Wyatt stood there, a cloth-wrapped bundle in his hands. Thought you might be hungry. She stepped back, and he came inside, setting the bundle on the small table. She unwrapped it. Bread, cold roast beef, a wedge of cheese. Her stomach growled. When did you have time to put this together? He shrugged. Foreman's wife helped. She knows you're here. She knows what's happening. Cora looked at him, surprised. You told her. He met her eyes. She's trustworthy. And you need people on your side. Cora sat down slowly, the gesture hitting harder than it should. No one had been on her side in years. She picked up a piece of bread, forcing herself to eat. Wyatt sat across from her, leaning back in the chair, his expression tired. You should eat too. He shook his head. I ate earlier. She studied him in the dim lamplight. He looked worn down, the lines around his eyes deeper than they should be for a man in his early 30s. What happened to you? Before Willow Ranch. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I worked for a man who didn't care if his crew lived or died. Cattle drive through bad territory. We lost 3 men to exposure and another to a rock slide. The boss blamed us for being careless, refused to pay out what we were owed. I tried to stand up for the others. He had me blacklisted. Took me a year to find work again. Cora set down the bread. That's why you stepped in yesterday. He nodded. I know what it's like to be branded. To have people decide who you are before you open your mouth. She felt something shift between them, a deeper understanding settling into place. We're both trying to prove we're more than our worst moments. Wyatt looked at her, and for the first time she saw something unguarded in his expression. Yeah, we are. The wind rattled the window again. Cora reached across the table, her hand hovering, then resting lightly on his. Thank you. For believing me. He didn't pull away. His hand turned under hers, his fingers curling gently around her palm. I do believe you, and we're going to make this right. She wanted to believe him, wanted to let herself hope. But hope was dangerous. Hope could break you. Still, she didn't pull her hand back. Not yet. They left before dawn, the sky still dark and heavy with stars. Wyatt saddled 2 horses, a sturdy roan for Cora and his bay for himself. He packed saddlebags with supplies, bedrolls, and a rifle strapped to his saddle. Cora checked the cinch on her saddle twice, her hands steady despite the nerves coiling in her stomach. She had ridden plenty. Mail routes required it. But this felt different. This was flight. This was risk. Wyatt swung into the saddle and looked at her. Ready? She nodded and mounted. They rode out into the cold darkness, the ranch falling away behind them. The trail toward Silver Ridge cut through open prairie and low hills. 2 days of hard riding if they pushed. Wyatt set a steady pace, not reckless but purposeful. Cora kept close, her eyes scanning the horizon as the sky began to lighten. By mid-morning, they stopped to water the horses at a shallow creek. Wyatt dismounted and checked the trail behind them. "See anything?" Cora asked, tense. "Not yet, but they'll figure out we're gone by now." He handed her a canteen. "Drink. We're not stopping again until dark." She drank, the cold water bracing, and watched him move with the calm efficiency of someone who had done this 100 times. He wasn't rattled. He wasn't second-guessing. She envied that. "They're going to come after you too, you know. When this is over." He glanced at her. "Maybe." She shook her head. "Not maybe. They'll say you helped a fugitive. You'll lose your job. Maybe worse." He corked the canteen and hung it back on his saddle. "Then I'll deal with it." She stared at him. "Why? Why risk everything for someone you barely know?" He turned to face her fully, his gray-blue eyes steady and direct. "Because you're not guilty. And because I'm tired of good people getting punished for being born into the wrong family." The words hit her square in the chest. She swallowed hard, forcing down the sudden tightness in her throat. "I don't know how to repay this. You don't have to." He mounted again. "Let's move." She followed, her heart pounding with something that felt dangerously close to trust. They made camp that night, in a sheltered draw, hidden from the trail by a low ridge. Wyatt built a small fire, keeping it low and shielded. Cora unsaddled the horses and rubbed them down, her muscles aching from the long ride. They ate in silence, hard bread and dried meat, the fire crackling softly between them. The stars overhead were cold and bright. Cora wrapped her coat tighter and stared into the flames. How far to Silver Ridge? Wyatt fed another stick into the fire. "If we ride hard tomorrow, we'll reach it by nightfall." She nodded. "And the judge? Will he see us right away?" Wyatt's expression was guarded. "I sent word ahead through the foreman. He knows we're coming. But there's no guarantee he'll rule in your favor." "I know." She said it quietly, the weight of it pressing down on her. "I know it's a gamble, but it's the only one I've got." Wyatt looked at her across the fire, his eyes shadowed. "You're braver than you think." She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "I'm terrified." He didn't smile. "Being scared doesn't make you weak. It makes you smart." She met his eyes, and the space between them felt suddenly smaller, more fragile. "What happens if this doesn't work? If the judge doesn't believe me?" He held her gaze. "Then we figure out the next move. Together." The word again. Together. It shouldn't mean as much as it did, but it anchored her. steadied the panic threatening to rise. She took a slow breath. I'm not used to having someone stand with me. Wyatt's jaw tightened. Get used to it. The fire popped, sending sparks drifting upward. Cora felt something shift inside her. Something she had locked down years ago. She didn't know if it was hope or just exhaustion, but it felt warm and dangerous and impossible to ignore. She looked away, afraid of what he might see in her face. You should get some sleep. He said it gently, his voice low. I'll take first watch. She nodded and moved to her bedroll, wrapping herself in the rough wool blanket. But sleep didn't come easily. She lay staring at the stars, listening to the fire and Wyatt's quiet breathing, and wondered if she had already lost the fight to keep her heart locked away. The next day was harder. They rode through cold wind and scattered patches of snow, the landscape turning rougher as they climbed into higher country. Wyatt pushed the pace, his eyes constantly scanning the trail behind them. By mid-afternoon, Cora saw what he was looking for. Dust rising in the distance. Riders. Her stomach clenched. How many? Wyatt didn't slow. 2. Maybe 3. Could be the bounty hunters. Could be the Marshal's men. Doesn't matter. We need to move. He urged the bay into a faster gait, and Cora kicked the roan to keep up. The horses stretched out, hooves pounding the frozen ground. The wind tore at her coat and stung her eyes. She leaned low over the roan's neck, trusting the animal's footing, her heart hammering in her chest. Behind them, the dust cloud grew closer. Wyatt glanced back, his jaw set. They're gaining. There's a canyon ahead. If we can reach it, we can lose them in the rocks. She nodded, too breathless to speak. The canyon mouth appeared ahead, a narrow cut between 2 walls of red stone. Wyatt plunged into it without hesitation, and Cora followed, the walls rising steep and close on either side. The trail twisted, rough and uneven, forcing them to slow. Wyatt dismounted quickly and grabbed the bay's reins. We go on foot from here. Faster and quieter. She slid off the roan, her legs shaky, and followed him deeper into the canyon. The sound of hoofbeats echoed behind them, growing louder. Wyatt pulled her into a narrow side passage, barely wide enough for the horses, and pressed against the rock wall. She stood next to him, her shoulder touching his, her breath coming fast and shallow. The riders passed the canyon entrance, their voices carrying faintly. Then, silence. Wyatt waited, tense and still. After what felt like an eternity, he exhaled slowly. They missed us. For now. Cora's knees nearly buckled with relief. She leaned back against the cold stone, closing her eyes. That was too close. Wyatt turned to face her, his expression grim. It's going to get closer before it's over. She opened her eyes and met his gaze. I know. He reached out, his hand brushing her arm. A brief, steadying touch. We keep moving. Silver Ridge is 4 hours away. We can make it. She nodded, drawing strength from his certainty. Let's go. They reached Silver Ridge as the sun dropped behind the western hills, painting the sky in shades of cold orange and purple. The town was larger than Iron Basin, with a main street lined with brick buildings and a courthouse at the far end. Wyatt led them to a small inn on the edge of town, paid for 2 rooms, and saw to the horses. Cora waited in the narrow hallway, her nerves stretched taut. When he returned, his face was set. "The judge will see us tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock. I explained the situation to his clerk. He'll hear your testimony." She nodded, trying to steady herself. "What do I say?" "Tell the truth. All of it. Don't leave anything out. The judge is fair, but he'll know if you're hiding something." She swallowed hard. What if the bounty hunters show up before then? Wyatt's hand moved to the revolver at his hip. "Then I'll handle it." She looked at him. This man who had risked everything for her, and felt her chest tighten. "You can't fight them alone. I won't have to. The sheriff here is an old friend. He'll back us up if it comes to that." The words should have been comforting, but Cora felt the weight of inevitability pressing down. Too many variables, too many ways this could go wrong. Wyatt must have seen it in her face, because he stepped closer, his voice low and steady. "Cora, look at me." She did. "We've come this far. We're not stopping now. You're not alone in this. Do you understand?" She nodded slowly, her throat tight. "I understand." "Good. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we end this." He turned and walked down the hall to his room. Cora stood alone for a moment, then went into her own small room and closed the door. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, and let herself feel the full weight of fear. Tomorrow, everything would change. One way or another. She woke before dawn, dressed carefully, and tried to eat the bread Wyatt brought her. It tasted like dust. They walked to the courthouse together in the cold morning light, their boots echoing on the boardwalk. The building was solid brick, 2 stories, with tall windows and a heavy wooden door. Inside, the air smelled of ink and old wood. A clerk led them to a small waiting room. Wyatt sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. She drew comfort from the contact, small as it was. At 5 minutes before 9, the door opened. A tall man in a dark suit stepped in, gray-haired and sharp-eyed. Judge Callahan. He gestured for them to follow. They entered a wood-paneled office, not a courtroom, which somehow made it feel more personal, more dangerous. The judge sat behind a broad desk and folded his hands. "Miss Prescott, Mr. Keene, I've read your letter. I understand the situation. Miss Prescott, you'll need to testify under oath. If I believe your account, I can issue a clearance order. If not, I'll have no choice but to remand you to custody." Cora's pulse pounded in her ears. She nodded. "I understand." The judge gestured to a chair. "Then let's begin." She sat, her hands folded tightly in her lap, and began. She told him everything. Her brother's crimes. The day she found out. The confrontation. Her decision to leave. The years of clean work. Her move to Iron Basin. She kept her voice steady, her answers direct. The judge asked sharp questions, probing for inconsistency, and she answered, each one, without flinching. Wyatt sat silent beside her, his presence an anchor. When she finished, the judge leaned back and studied her. "You're asking me to believe you severed all ties with your brother 4 years ago and have lived an honest life since?" "Yes, sir." "And you have witnesses to your character in Iron Basin?" Wyatt spoke for the first time. "I can vouch for her." "Your Honor." Soak in the foreman at Willow Ranch and the storekeeper's wife. She's done nothing but honest work since she arrived. The judge's gaze shifted to Wyatt. And you're willing to stake your reputation on that? Yes, sir. The room fell silent. Cora's heart hammered. Then the judge nodded slowly. I believe you, Miss Prescott. He opened a drawer, pulled out a sheet of paper, and began writing. I'm issuing a clearance order. This states that you are not a fugitive and are not wanted in connection with your brother's crimes. Any bounty hunter or lawman who tries to detain you will be in violation of territorial law. Cora's breath left her in a rush. She felt lightheaded. The judge signed the paper, pressed his seal into wax, and handed it to her. Keep that with you at all times, and stay out of trouble. Yes, sir. Thank you. The judge's expression softened slightly. You've been given a second chance, Miss Prescott. Don't waste it. She stood, clutching the paper like a lifeline. I won't. Wyatt stood beside her, his hand briefly touching her back, steadying. They left the courthouse together, stepping into the cold, bright morning. Cora stopped on the boardwalk, staring at the paper in her hands. It's real, she whispered. It's over. Wyatt smiled, a rare open expression. Yeah, it is. She looked up at him, and something broke open inside her. Without thinking, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. He went still for a heartbeat, then his arms came up around her, holding her close. She pressed her face against his shoulder, breathing in the scent of leather and cold air and relief. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. His voice was low and rough. You don't have to thank me. She pulled back just enough to look at him. Yes, I do. His hands lingered on her shoulders, his eyes searching hers. Then, the moment shattered. Voices, sharp and angry, echoed from down the street. Cora turned. Two men stood near the edge of the boardwalk, hard-faced and armed. Bounty hunters. One of them pointed. That's her. Prescott's sister. Wyatt moved in front of Cora instantly, his hand on his revolver. She's cleared. Judge Callahan just issued the order. The taller hunter spat. I don't care what some judge says. There's a reward on her head. Wyatt's voice went cold. You touch her, you're breaking the law. Try it. The hunters hesitated, hands hovering near their guns. The street around them went quiet. Then a new voice cut through the tension. That's enough. The Silver Ridge sheriff stepped out from the alley, rifle in hand, his deputy beside him. The judge's order is legal. You two have no claim here. Leave town now. The hunters glared, but the odds had shifted. Slowly, they turned and walked toward their horses. Cora watched them go, her heart still pounding. Wyatt didn't relax until they were out of sight. The sheriff nodded to him. Wyatt, good to see you. Thanks for the backup, Sam. The sheriff's gaze shifted to Cora. Miss Prescott, you're clear to go. Stay safe. She nodded, still shaken. Thank you. The sheriff tipped his hat and walked back toward his office. Cora turned to Wyatt, her voice unsteady. That was too close. Wyatt's expression was grim. Yeah. But it's done. They're gone. And you've got the paper. She looked down at the clearance order, then back at him. What now? His eyes softened. Now you go home. Back to Iron Basin. Back to your life. She felt a sudden sharp ache. And you? He hesitated. I go back to Willow Ranch. She wanted to ask him to stay. Wanted to tell him that the idea of going back alone felt impossibly empty. But the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she nodded. All right. Let's go home. They rode back toward Iron Basin the next day, the journey feeling both longer and shorter than before. Cora carried the clearance order in her coat pocket, checking it obsessively every few miles to make sure it was still there. Wyatt rode beside her, quiet but steady. They didn't talk much. The silence between them felt heavy with unspoken things. By the time they reached the outskirts of Iron Basin, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the prairie. Wyatt pulled his horse to a stop. Cora stopped beside him. What's wrong? He didn't look at her. I need to ask you something. She waited, her pulse picking up. Do you want to stay here? In Iron Basin? She blinked. What do you mean? He turned to face her, his expression guarded. You've got your clearance. You could go anywhere. Start fresh somewhere no one knows your name. You don't have to stay in a place that almost locked you up. She stared at him, understanding hitting her slowly. You think I'm leaving? He didn't answer, but she saw the tension in his jaw. Cora dismounted and stepped closer. Wyatt, look at me. He did, reluctantly. I'm not leaving. She said it firmly. Iron Basin is my home. The people there gave me a chance, even if it got complicated. And I'm not running anymore. His shoulders relaxed slightly, but the guarded look didn't leave his eyes. All right. She took a breath, forcing herself to say the rest. And I'm not leaving you. His eyes snapped to hers, surprise flickering across his face. Cora. She stepped closer, her voice steadier now. You stood with me when no one else would. You risked everything. I don't know what this is between us, but I know I don't want to walk away from it. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he dismounted, closing the distance between them. You mean that? Yes. His hand came up, hesitant, then cupped her cheek. She leaned into the touch, her heart pounding. I don't have much to offer. He said it quietly. I'm a ranch hand. I've got a bunk and a paycheck and not much else. She smiled, her eyes stinging. That's more than enough. He exhaled slowly, and then he kissed her. It was careful at first, tentative, like he was afraid she might pull away. But she didn't. She leaned into him, her hands gripping his coat, and kissed him back with everything she had. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. So you're staying? She laughed softly. I'm staying. Good. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and the last of the fear and loneliness that had weighed on her for years finally began to lift. They rode into Iron Basin together as the last light faded from the sky. The town was quiet, lamps glowing in windows, smoke rising from chimneys. Wyatt led her to the boarding house, and they stopped outside. You'll be all right tonight. She nodded. I'll be fine. And you? He smiled faintly. I'll be at the ranch, but I'll come by tomorrow. Check in with the Marshal. Make sure everything's settled. She reached out and took his hand. Wyatt. Thank you. For everything. He squeezed her hand gently. We're past thank you now, Cora. She smiled, her chest warm. I guess we are. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. A brief, tender gesture. Get some rest. She watched him ride away, then went inside, climbing the narrow stairs to her small, rented room. It looked the same as it had 3 days ago, but everything felt different. She set her satchel down, pulled out the clearance order, and placed it carefully on the table. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and let herself feel it. Relief, safety, hope, and something deeper. Something she hadn't let herself feel in years. Love, or the beginning of it at least. The next morning, she woke early and walked to the Marshal's office. The deputy from before was there, his expression sour. The Marshal looked up from his desk, his face unreadable. Miss Prescott. She handed him the clearance order. Judge Callahan issued this. I'm not wanted. I'm not connected to my brother's crimes. The Marshal read it carefully, then nodded. All right. You're cleared. He looked at the deputy. Spread the word. No one touches her. The deputy scowled but didn't argue. Cora felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Thank you, Marshal. He handed the paper back. Stay out of trouble, Miss Prescott. I intend to. She left the office and walked toward the general store, her steps lighter than they had been in days. The storekeeper's wife saw her coming and smiled. Cora, you're all right. We heard what happened. Cora smiled back. I'm fine. Everything's settled. The woman reached out and squeezed her hand. Good. We're glad you're staying. The words settled into Cora's chest, warm and solid. She belonged here. For the first time in years, she had a place she could call home. 2 weeks later, Cora stood outside the Willow Ranch main house, waiting. The foreman's wife had invited her to Sunday dinner, and Wyatt had promised to be there. She clutched a small wrapped bundle, her contribution to the meal, and tried to calm her nerves. The door opened, and Wyatt stepped out, cleaned up in a fresh shirt and his best vest. He smiled when he saw her. You made it. She smiled back. I said I would. He took the bundle from her hands and offered his arm. She took it, and they walked together toward the main house. Inside, the table was set, warm and welcoming, and the foreman and his wife greeted Cora like family. They ate together, talking and laughing, and for the first time in as long as she could remember, Cora felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. After dinner, Wyatt walked her outside. The night was cold and clear, stars scattered thick across the sky. They stood close, his arm around her shoulders. You happy? He asked it quietly. She leaned into him. Yeah, I am. Good. He turned to face her, his expression serious. I've been thinking. She raised an eyebrow. About what? About this. Us. He took a breath. I know it's only been a few weeks, and I know we've got a lot to figure out. But I want you to know I'm serious about this. About you. Her chest tightened, warmth spreading through her. I'm serious too. He smiled, that rare open smile that made her heart skip. Then, we'll figure it out. Together. She reached up and kissed him, slow and certain. Together. They stood under the stars, wrapped in each other, and Cora felt the last of the fear finally fall away. She had spent years running, years hiding, years afraid to trust. But here, with Wyatt, she was done running. This was home. This was love. And for the first time in her life, she believed it would last. Spring came to Iron Basin with a rush of green and wildflowers. Cora continued her mail route, her reputation restored, her name no longer shadowed. Wyatt worked the ranch, steady and reliable, and every Sunday they spent together, building something solid and real. One evening, as they sat on the porch of the guest cabin watching the sunset, Wyatt pulled a small wooden box from his pocket. He opened it, revealing a simple silver ring. "I don't have much," he said quietly, "but I've got a steady job and a future here, and I want you in it. Permanently." Cora's breath caught. She looked at him. This man who had risked everything for her, who had believed in her when no one else did. Yes, he slipped the ring onto her finger, and she kissed him, fierce and certain. They were married a month later in the small Iron Basin church, with the foreman and his wife standing as witnesses. It was simple and quiet, exactly what they both wanted. Afterward, they rode back to Willow Ranch together, to the small cabin Wyatt had fixed up for them. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. That night, as they lay together in the dark, Cora rested her head on his chest and listened to the steady beat of his heart. "You saved me," she whispered. Wyatt's hand stroked her hair. "We saved each other." She smiled, her eyes closing. "Yeah, we did." And in the quiet safety of their home, under the wide frontier sky, Cora Prescott Keene finally stopped running.